retook control of this area and have restarted military operations in really what has been a complete collapse of the ceasefire that had really calmed the situation for the last 8 weeks or so.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook. We talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, there's been a resumption of fighting in Gaza. What's the latest?
So earlier this week, we saw Israel begin an aerial campaign, airstrikes into Gaza once again. And then the next day, on Wednesday, we saw them restart ground operations, moving heavy numbers of troops, mainly into the center of Gaza, where they retook the Netzarim corridor, which is sort of a land barrier that runs sort of across Gaza, east and west. And so they retook control of this area and have restarted military operations in really what has been a complete collapse of the ceasefire that had really calmed the situation for the last 8 weeks or so.
So President Trump has been busy on the phone this week trying to advance some kind of settlement in Ukraine. He's talked to both Russian President Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky. What's the latest state of play there?
So what we've seen is it's hard to really read between the lines between these three major players, but President Zelensky is pretty much sort of at the will of President Trump, given the Ukrainians' both reliance on U.S. support, as well as just sort of the President Trump's desire to see the conflict end. That being said, we've seen Russian leader Vladimir Putin express an openness to a negotiated settlement, at the same time making the likelihood of that very unlikely with maximalist demands about territorial concessions, the stopping of aid from any U.S. or European country to Ukraine, a reversal on NATO's declaration that Ukraine is on the irreversible path to membership. And so while the Russian side has really at least outwardly expressed an openness, they've sort of couched it in, we want very specific terms or no deal. And even as these calls are happening, we're seeing both Russia's military conduct airstrikes all throughout western Ukraine. We're seeing some Ukrainian retaliatory attacks on Russian oil in Russia. And so while we talk about these conversations that the leaders of these countries are having, there are very real, ongoing, developing situations on the battlefield.
So we've been talking a lot about cuts going on throughout the federal government with DOGE and other things in the Trump administration, and the Pentagon is not fully exempt from that. What are some of the things the Pentagon has announced as possible savings?
So the Pentagon, first and foremost, they want to reduce the size of the workforce. And so the Pentagon, obviously, there are two separate parts of the workforce. There's the military and there are civilian employees. Mm-hmm. And so there are about 900,000 civilian employees throughout the Department of Defense, and that's not just at the Pentagon, but that's all over the world. And so the Secretary and his team want to cut around 5 to 8% of that workforce, which may sound like a small percentage, but we're talking upwards of 60,000 people losing their jobs. As of this point, they're trying to get that number through 3 different methods. The first of which is they offered every civilian employee a voluntary deferred resignation, which means if you were to accept this proposal, you would resign. You would be put on administrative leave, paid for a short period of time while you're still on the payroll effectively, and then you resign and you can pursue other opportunities. So far, through the first couple weeks of this being offered, 20,000 civilian employees have taken this, so about 1/3 of their goal. They've also implemented a hiring freeze. They onboard DoD roughly 6,000 civilian employees a month. So just by pausing this onboarding of new employees, they say they're saving thousands of jobs every month. And so in a slightly different vein, in terms of real dollar figures, we've heard the Pentagon say they're looking to, they don't use the word cut, but divert, identify and reroute $50 billion worth of defense spending that they say is either is not aligned with their vision. And so often this includes are things related to DEI, things related to climate change, which we've heard Pentagon leaders now say it's no longer a part of their mission. And so far we heard Secretary Hegseth say earlier today they've now uncovered $800 million, which is a lot of money, but it's still less than 1/50th of the $50 billion that they're looking to identify and redirect.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.